everybody, welcome back to the Perfectly Pieced 2026 Mystery Quilt Series. We've got the February block today. This is the orange peel block. I'll be stitching out this block step by step, so it will also work as a block tutorial for the February Perfectly Pieced block. This block has a lot of history, and when I was doing research, I found traditionally it's done as applique, so I found it really interesting that Kimberbell turned it into a pieced block. Normally, when you make this block, it's round, but because we're piecing it, it's got a couple of straight edges. It's usually made with templates. You can download free paper templates online. There are plastic templates, and I have the AccuQuilt system. I actually have an orange peel die. When you use something like this or you use a template, the orange peel is applique and goes on top of your fabric, and then you can put a decorative stitch around the applique. It's a very interesting block. If you research orange peel, you'll find some really fun historical articles. It's also a common shape in background quilting, and I have some of these fun stash-in stores. There's your orange peel right there. So you'll see this shape a lot in quilting. If you look on Kimberbell's website, they even have background quilting with the orange peel design. Today I'm going to stitch out one 8-inch block, and we're going to add the borders for our quilt. There's two previous mystery quilt videos. The introduction video tells you all about this information packet, where you go to download it. I'll have a link below, the sizes and fabric requirements. And the first video for the teacup block from January, I stepped through some things in a little more detail than we're going to do today. So if this is your first video and you're jumping into the mystery quilt, I'd say go back and watch the two previous videos. If you're making the lap quilt with the 8-inch blocks and you don't want to just have one orange peel, I have a couple options for you. You can make 4 of the 4-inch blocks, and there's a couple ways you can arrange that. By rotating the blocks, you can make a circle, or you can make an X. These two configurations will give you a completed looking block. I'm doing one big orange peel because it's easier to see on camera. It's going to be good for the block tutorial, and we're going to do something fun with this project. For this month's 4-inch block project, I'm going to be stitching something out for this. I have several ideas. Since we stitched a pillow last month with the teacups, I'm going to come up with something a little bit different. If you're wanting to stitch this, you'll be able to use this video for the mystery quilt as your block tutorial, and I'll also show the borders. As far as joining the borders for longer sections, I'll link a video below for you. That way, if you want to make your block for this and jump right in to make this project, you can. But again, probably in about a week, I'll have another new video, and I'm going to change this up. We're going to have some fun with the orange peel block. I'm going to show you different layouts and different colors, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that. The fabrics I've picked for my mystery quilt are Lori Holt's Gentler Times. I also have some autumn fabrics in here, and what I've been doing as I go is the fabrics I'm using, I'm setting aside. I've already picked my fabrics for today and cut everything. I'll be using HBI No Show Mesh Stabilizer. It's very similar to Kimberbell's Light Mesh Cutaway, Missouri Stars 80/20 Cotton Poly Batting, and my borders for the mystery quilt project are a solid called Kona Bone. It's an off-white color. The borders this month are the heart borders. I'll be using the 2-inch borders. I'm making the lap quilt. I also gave a ladder quilt option. The 1-inch borders will be good for that. And if you're in my Facebook group, somebody just posted a 2-inch teacup. It's adorable. Facebook group is linked below. You need to look at that. She shows her little teacup and talks about her plans for the year using the 2-inch block size. This month's Perfectly Pieced also includes this Hearts 11 quilting design. I'm not going to use this today, but when I go to make this month's project, we're going to use that. Let's go over what we're going to need today. We've got our orange peel fabric, the background fabric. I've got some threads, my scissors, my tape, and I've also prepped my batting and my borders. I'm going to set the scissors and the tape aside, and we're going to talk about thread selection and then how I cut my fabric. I picked 2 colors of thread for this month's block. The gold color on the left is for the orange peel block, and the red color is going to be for the quilting in the borders. I picked this red for the borders because I wanted to pick up the red in this fabric from the orange peel, and I want the quilting on the orange peel block to blend in like I did with the teacup. This was the closest color I had to that fabric. When I looked at the fabrics, I wanted to get something kind of orange. This color was the closest thing to orange in the fabric bundle, and it had a print that's kind of more spaced out. Since we're going to have that big orange peel, that gives this print a chance to shine, versus if I'm cutting this up into tiny pieces and using it in something else, you really won't see the print. For the background fabric, I chose this print. Looking at the leaves, see the shape? It looks just like an orange peel. I thought this was great. It matches this really nice. Since it's from the same fat quarter bundle, my colors coordinate, and the shape of this is going to mirror the shape in the orange peel. I don't have fusible on any of my fabrics, the block fabric or the border fabric. I'm doing the same thing I did last month. I gave everything a spray with this Faultless Heavy Finish, not a super heavy spray. I did not saturate my fabrics. I gave it a light spray, let it dry, and ironed it, and it gives it a nice crisp feel, and it keeps it from fraying as I'm working with the fabric. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I cut my fabrics to make the most of my fat quarter. On the back are the cutting instructions for all the block sizes. You'll see I've got a sticky note here covering up the 2, 4, and 6. That keeps me from cutting the wrong sizes. I also put a note next to this cut here that's the batting. I didn't want to accidentally cut another piece of fabric. I went down the row and I looked at the measurements. You can see I circled anything that has a 2, and I wrote down 2 inches. And then I wrote down the length of each of those. So you needed a 2x5, 2x8, 2x5, 2x8. So I need 2 inches, 26 inches long. The width of my fat quarter is about 21.5 inches. So I cut one 2-inch strip. Then I looked at the rest of these cuts. We have 2.5, 2.25, 2.5, and 2.25. I added up the inches for the 2.5 and for the 2.25, and instead of cutting a 2.5-inch strip and then a partial 2.5-inch strip and a 2.25-inch strip, I cut two 2.5-inch strips. This made it really easy to cut the pieces. From the 2-inch strip, I cut as many of these pieces as I can, and then I just went over to the 2.5 and cut the last piece and trimmed it to 2. If you're interested in seeing fabric cutting on camera, let me know. This was a really easy way to cut the fabric. You just started with 3 long strips, a 2-inch, and then 2 2.5-inch strips, and cut everything from there. The very first fabric here is this fabric right here. So there's only one of these. After I cut all the background pieces, this is all that was left. So you can see that that method of cutting did not produce a lot of waste. We just have a couple of little pieces of scrap fabric. I have everything laid out on an 18-inch design board. I have these little magic pins. You can iron over them, at least you can before you write on them with a Sharpie, which is what I did. I've numbered these on both sides with a Sharpie. I think I have numbers 1 through 15 now, and probably 2 sets. It's a great way to keep track of your fabric. That way, if you're moving this around, if anything happens to slide, I've got the pin in it, it's not going to come off and the little numbers won't move. I have my 9-inch square of batting. I'm going to put that on the other board. So we're going to start out with that. And then you can see I've got batting, fabric, batting, fabric. These are for my borders. For the borders, we've got our 8-inch block. I do the side borders first, meaning they have to be at least 8 inches long. And then your top and bottom borders, you've got a 2-inch, an 8-inch, and a 2-inch. So these have to be 12-inch. If you're doing a smaller block with smaller borders, you'll just need to check your own math. We talked last time about the border files, and these border files are a little funky again this month. When I looked at the border files, I pulled up the 2x10. The 2x10 file is 9.06 inches long. It's not 10 inches long, but that will work for these side pieces because they only have to be 8 inches. So I'll use the 2x10 for that. Our top and our bottom need to be 12 inches long. When I pulled up the 2x12 file, it's only 10.88 inches long. That's not going to be long enough. I pulled up the 2x14 file. That one is 12.69 inches long. That's the file we're going to use for our top and bottom borders. If you're in a smaller hoop like a 5x7, you just need to look at the border sizes that will fit and make the adjustment. I talked about that on the previous video. For my batting, I cut 2 strips, 2.5 by 11, 2 strips, 2.5 by 14. My fabric for the borders, I cut 2 strips, 3 inches wide by 11 inches long, and 2 strips, 3 inches wide by 14.5 inches long. I'll be using 2 hoops today on my machine. In order to make the 8-inch block, I have to use my 9.5 by 14-inch hoop. When you pull up the 8-inch block, it's bigger than 8 inches. It's 8.5 or 8.6 something. So my smaller hoops that are 8 by 12 and 8 by 8 don't work. For my borders, I'll use this hoop again for the larger borders, but for the smaller borders, on the sides, I'll be able to use my 8 by 12 hoop. So you'll see 2 different hoop sizes today. We'll start by making our orange peel block. I'm going to put my gold thread on the machine. I've got my 9-inch square of batting, all of my fabric pieces. I'm going to put my larger 9.5 by 14-inch hoop on the machine. Let's go load our file. I'm on a Baby Lock Meridian. My files are on USB. I have my instructions in front of me here. I use a folding metal book stand to hold everything. You want to make sure you've got this in front of you. That's our roadmap to making sure we lay out all our pieces correctly. We're going to make the 8-inch block today, but all the blocks are made the same way. So if you're looking for a block tutorial, this will be fine for whichever size you're using. There's 2 versions of each block. We've got without quilting and with quilting. Today we're going to use the block with the quilting. When I do the monthly project, I'm going to do something a little bit different, and I think I'm going to use the one without quilting. I'm thinking of a really fun project, so again, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that. I'm going to bring up the 8-inch block with quilting. It's one file, everything is included. Set. Embroidery, we're ready to start. I have the gold colored thread on my machine. The beginning steps we went through step by step last time. We've got our batting placement, then you have a batting tack down, you trim your batting, and you stitch out the piecing template. It's exactly the same as last month. I'm going to go ahead and run all of those steps together. Once your piecing template is stitched out, we're ready to start working on our block. We're going to start with our piece 1 fabric, placing it right side up, completely centered over section 1. Section 1 is the big kind of football in the middle. I just realized this is kind of the color of a football, isn't it? I guess you could make footballs out of this if you're into sports. Go ahead and make sure that that's completely covered. It's really sticking to my batting. I don't think I need to tape it, but you know, just in case. Tape that in place. And then we're going to stitch out the first trimming and placement line. We're going to trim away this piece at the top. I think I'm going to keep this, put it in my scrap pile. I measured it. I can actually get a 2-inch square. I'm going to save this. We want to grab our piece 2 fabric. Piece 2 is your background. It's going to go right side down, centered along the trimming and placement line, which ends here. So don't try and center it like this. It'll be in the wrong spot. So look where that stitching ends. I'm going to center it along that line. And if you look at your diagram, piece 2 is going to be right here. So we're only covering this little part. I did not use fusible. If you're worried about your main fabric here in the center showing through your background, you would want to put fusible on the background. I'm just not all that worried about it. It's going to look fine. Go ahead and tape that in place, and we're going to stitch the seam. That's all stitched out. I'm going to remove the tape. I'm going to go ahead and finger press. I'm going to do the same thing I did last time and give my block a good press at the end before we do the final quilting. I'm going to take this piece of tape I just took off and put it up there to help keep it nice and flat. We're going to stitch out the next trimming and placement line. We need to trim away this piece here and this piece here. After I trim the pieces, I've got this little triangle right here, and there's some stitches there. I don't want this to show through my background fabric, so I'm going to carefully use my seam ripper, pop these couple of stitches, and then trim away this little tiny piece of fabric. Here's that piece right there. I'm going to put my hand underneath this. I have my hoop on my lap. I think there's only 3 stitches. I have to be careful. I don't want to rip my batting. I just want to trim those stitches. You might be able to do that with scissors. The stitch here on the end is probably a tack down stitch. I'm going to get underneath the fabric and just sort of wiggle it. There. So now it comes up and it peels away, and I can trim that completely away so it's not going to show through my background fabric. Let me show you that. Now it's nice and clean right there. You want to grab your piece 3 fabric, same thing, right side down, center it along that line, add a piece of tape if you like, and then we'll stitch the seam. It's going to be the same thing throughout the entire block. So once this seam has stitched, flip and press. You can take it to the iron or you can finger press. I'm doing the finger press. I'm going to take that piece of tape, put it over here, help keep it nice and flat. We're going to stitch out the next trimming and placement line. The trimming and placement line is stitched out, same thing. Trim everything that's outside of that stitch line, and then we're going to grab piece 4. When I trim along this line, I've got this funny little bump out here. I'm not worried about that. Right here on the outside is our trimming line. This is all seam allowance, so I don't have to cut this away. It's not going to show through anywhere on my quilt block. You want to grab your piece 4 fabric. We're going to place that right side down, centered along the trimming and placement line. Add a piece of tape if you want, and then stitch the seam. It does get a little bit repetitive, but you end up with really good results and a piece block that, you know, is actually, like they say, perfectly pieced. Go ahead and stitch the seam. Take off your tape, flip it, press it, and then we're going to stitch out the next trimming and placement line. We need to trim off all the pieces above the trimming and placement line. We're on piece 5, same thing, right sides together, so right side down, centered along that trimming and placement line, tape it in place and stitch the seam, then flip and press. The top part of our block is done. We're down at the bottom. Pieces 6, 7, 8, and 9 are just like pieces 2, 3, 4, and 5. They're just on this side of the block. I'll go ahead and work through those and set it to music so you can watch the process. It's essentially a mirror image. And then we'll talk about what to do before you do your quilting. I'm going to start with my trimming and placement line for piece 6, and then I'll run everything together. Our block is pieced. The next thing we need to stitch is the trimming line. That's going to go completely around the outside of the block. So I'm going to take this over to my iron. I want to remove all of the tape. You don't want to iron over the paper tape. It burns, it gets sticky, it smells. Just don't do that. It's a bad idea. Give your block a good press. My block is pressed. I'm going to sit here and watch it stitch out the trimming line that goes around the outside. You've got lots of folded fabric. You want to make sure your presser foot doesn't get caught. Next we're going to stitch out the quilting, but I want to show you something right here in the corner. Do you see this? When I placed this piece of fabric, I placed it too far over in that direction. I should have pulled it a little bit more that way. But it's going to be fine. It's right here on the trimming line. We're going to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance on each side, so I'm not worried about that. Let's stitch out the quilting. The quilting is done. I lucked out. We had that nice line that stitched right there and right there. It tacked that little piece of fabric down for me. I'm going to take this off and set it aside. We'll trim everything together at the end. I already have my hoop ready for the smaller borders that we're going to add onto the side. I need to switch and put my red thread on the machine and we'll start stitching those. Bring up our files for the side borders. And remember we talked about double checking the file. Let's bring up our files for the 2 side borders. Remember to double check the actual length of the stitching on the border files. I'm going to use the 2x10. I talked about that at the beginning. Let's pull up the 2x7 in case somebody's working with a 5x7 hoop. It's only 5.44 inches long. That's what I mean by make sure you check this and see how long is that border. Let's go ahead and pull up our 2x10, and I'm using this for my side borders that have to be 8 inches long. See how the 2x10 is only 9.06 inches long? That's okay. I need at least 8 inches. Let's go ahead and hit edit, move, slide it over a little bit, hit OK. I did this slower in the previous video. If you need to see it slowed down, please go to the January video. I'm duplicating using the border duplicate key, side by side, adding one and spacing these out. The reason I use the border duplicate key is because it will stitch out the same stitch on both borders. Step 1, step 1, step 2, step 2. If you use the regular duplicate key, which you can see is now grayed out because I already used this one, it'll do one border start to finish and then the next one. That's why I like that border duplicate key. I don't think anything will happen during this stitch up, but just in case, saving it to my machine. Let's get started. I'm going to use my red thread throughout. If you want, you can use a neutral color. The red thread is also going to help with the trimming process. We talked about this last time, but I figured out another way to also make trimming the borders easier. I'll talk about that when we get to the trimming. I'm going to stitch out the batting placement lines, place my strips of batting. I'll add a piece of tape, tack them down, and trim. My batting is tacked down and trimmed. I have a visible thread on my machine. We're going to stitch out the fabric placement line. That's the line that's really helpful when we're trimming and you can only see it from the back. If you're using a neutral thread and you don't want to change to a visible thread, I'll show you another option when we go to trim our strips. Let's stitch out our fabric placement line. Next, we're going to place our fabric. Make sure you cover those placement lines. I've got a piece of tape at the top. Going to double check. Everything looks good, but I'm going to watch it stitch the tack down. I do think that's a little crooked. It's going to tack down like this, and then it's going to go up. So keep an eye on it. Once you've stitched out your tack down line, stitch out your quilting. My two side borders are stitched out. That looks great. Look how nice that dark thread looks on that fabric. It's really going to stand out. I'm going to take this out of my hoop, set it aside. I have to do the same thing with the longer borders in my bigger hoop. I'll go ahead and do that off camera. We'll move on to trimming and assembly. Let's start by trimming our block. I have my 8.5 inch square orange pop ruler here. We talked about this last time. I've shown how to use these before. Really quick, just make sure your blade is all the way over. Hold that down, rotating cutting mat helps. I'm going to go ahead and trim my block. For our borders, we have our side borders and our top and bottom borders. I'm just going to show you this on one of the side borders. As a reminder, don't trim on the lines on the front. We need this to be 2.5 inches wide. This is a 2.5 inch ruler. If I line it up here, the other line is right here at 2.25. If you want to trim from the front and you want this centered, you have to add 1/8 of an inch outside of those stitch lines. Flipping it to the back, you can see the outside line, which is the fabric placement line. It's only visible from the back. When you measure that, it's 2.5. If you're doing the smaller borders, it would be 1.5. I can easily see this because I use this visible thread. I was working on Sweetheart Street this week and trimming the borders, and my thread wasn't very visible. If you've got a water-soluble pen, like this one, this comes from the Kimberbell punch needle kits. There's also one in the Kimberbell Clear Blue Tiles Essentials set. You can also use a friction pen, tailor's chalk, anything like that. You can use it and mark this outside stitch line. So if you have this in white thread and it's really hard to see from the back, you can mark it. You can go all the way down, or if you just want to mark, little bits here and there, like that, it's going to help you line up your ruler and make sure you get this trimmed straight. I'm actually going to bring my rotating cutting mat back, and since I have this 2.5 inch ruler, let's line it up. See the blue line right there and right there. It's a great way to see if you've got your ruler lined up correctly. You can also line up the 1/4 inch line on your ruler. This is a Creative Grids ruler. It has a 1/4 inch line here. I can line that up with the line for the batting, because you know the 2 lines here on either side of the batting are 2 inches apart, which is the finished width of this border strip. So you would add a 1/4 of an inch, a 1/4 of an inch. You can do that as well. Whatever works best for you. I really like using those fabric placement lines. It's easier than adding an 1/8 of an inch to the outside lines on the front. Line that up. I'm going to trim this one. I'm going to attempt to hold the ruler so it doesn't shift. And then I'm going to trim the other side. Let's have a look at that. I can still see my little blue line here. I didn't get it perfectly centered, but the difference between here and here is very minute. You're not going to see it. When we go to attach these to our block, we can look at the design. This one's stitched out at 9.06 inches. And when I look at my block, luckily, I'm going to have a complete looking border. Do you see that? How I've got the heart here and the heart here? It didn't end up with a full part here and finishing with half. So you can center this one, the middle heart right there, and you put them right sides together, stitch with a 1/4 inch seam. I've been pressing open because we're going to do stitch in the ditch at the end. I'm just going to lay this out as if I already sewed it together, and let's grab the other one. We'll lay this one out as well, and let's look at the top and the bottom borders. Here's one of the borders for the top and the bottom. That's going to look good as well. You can see if you go in from the outside, you've got a center design here. Center that, center of the block. I believe I did that last time where you can fold your block, get the little mark, figure out where the center is, and then line it up and stitch it on. So I'm going to trim all my borders, attach the side borders first, top and bottom second. I showed this in detail last time, so I'll go ahead and do that off camera. If you have any questions, let me know below, and I'll press everything and come back and show you the finished block. Everything is sewn together, seams are pressed open, I've trimmed off the extra. Let's see what it looks like. One thing I noticed is you can see the points are cut off in the quilting pattern here, and I don't quite have it even. You know, I really don't mind. It's not going to bother me. Over here I got it pretty even. And on the longer borders, when we sew this in, we're going to lose just the edge of the quilting designs right there. I think it turned out great. When everything is in the quilt, it's really going to look fantastic. I'm going to set this in my container with the teacup block, save my instructions. That way, if I need to refer back to it, I have all my notes here and my notes about how I cut this block. I will be working on the monthly project coming soon. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that. I'm going to go over selecting fabrics, how to lay this out, maybe even a little bit of block history, you know, just a little bit. I don't want to bore everybody, but we'll talk about ways to give this a different look. Some other things going on with the channel right now are the applique of the month. January's video is up. I did a step-by-step tutorial on the All You Need Is Love runner. As soon as I get February's, which will be the same time everybody else gets their kit, I will start working on that. I'll have a new tutorial for that. I just finished a video for the Well Wishes designs. These are great kind of multi-use designs. They cover a lot of things. We've got You Did It, Congrats, Shine Bright, Big Hugs. There's a nice one here about friends, and Happy Birthday. I stitch out the Shine Bright and the Happy Birthday. I'll link that below if you'd like to check that out. And I haven't forgotten about the Feeling Festive Bella Box. We're still working on this. The next project will be the teacup zipper pouch. When I'm working on things for the channel as a Kimberbell affiliate, anything they provide to me, like Perfectly Pieced Applique of the Month, and they did provide the Well Wishes to me, I make sure to get all of those done first and on schedule. The Feeling Festive Bella Box is something that I purchased, so I work that in between what I think of as my required projects. There's already videos for the Snow Place Like Home tiling scene, the Polar Bear rice warmer. I have a video on my channel that shows you how to embroider on a Kimberbell leather snap tray, and I also stitched out the Sea Otter rice warmer. If you're not already a member of my new Facebook group, that will be linked in the description box below. We'd love to have you. It's still a pretty small group, but there's a lot of good people in there sharing their crafts, what they're working on. I'd really love to see some of your mystery quilt blocks. Thank you so much for stitching along with me. Again, watch for the Perfectly Pieced monthly project video coming soon, and I'll see you next time.